Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Detlef
Mehlis, the head of the International Committee investigating the death of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, announced today that he decided to omit some of the names of Syrian officials who are suspected of being involved in the final report, in case they are innocent. Mehlis told journalists that the names of Syrian officials were omitted from the first draft of the report because they are main suspects, including the brother-in-law of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and head of the military intelligence Asif Shaukat. He said that this copy reached the media by mistake. He denied that omitting these names was the result of pressure by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, indicating that he was urged to do this because they might be innocent. The Lebanese are not surprised by the contents of the investigation that was presented to the UN Secretary Council by senior UN investigator Detlef Mehlis, which links Syrian officials to the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. The report appears to be returning hope to the Lebanese of writing the final chapter in the rule of President Emil Lahoud, a supporter of Syria.
Perhaps
the Lebanese have not gotten over the shock caused by the report of the international investigator Detlef Mehlis, who feels that he needs more time and investigation to finish the file on the assassination of the former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. He accused Lebanese and Syrian suspects, most of whom security officials, to be behind the plan and execution of the operation, and presented the political events that preceded the criminal assassination. He hinted that Damascus did not completely cooperate with him to facilitate his mission.
We don't know who committed this crime, but accusations have been distributed to Lebanese and security officials. But these accusations remain just accusations without full proof until further evidence is provided by the concerned parties.
وجهات النظر في العاصمة اللبنانية حيال ما تضمنه التقرير تباينت بين مؤيد.
Opinions about the report in the Lebanese capital were mixed, between those who support it without any reservations and those who criticize it for providing an incomplete and unspecific body of evidence. However, what is notable is that the report includes names from the general leadership of the Palestinian Popular Front among the list of those involved in the assassination.
وهو ما جعل البعض يتساءل عن خلفية إثارة قضية الانتشار العسكري للقيادة العامة في مناطق لبنانية قبل صدور التقرير.
باتت الصورة واضحة سواء في البعد اللبناني أو في البعد السوري.
The picture is clear concerning the Lebanese and Syrian affairs. The suspects are now clear. I believe that this is a big problem facing the president. This is a problem that needs to be resolved.
من المفترض أن نجد لها حلاً.
واضح أن التقرير.
It is clear that the report is a report of political accusations rather than criminal accusations.
The report says that the plans for the operation began about 2 months before it was executed, presenting some data that helped in directing accusations against some of the names that were mentioned in the report.
هذا التقرير لا يتضمن
This report does not include any accusations or charges or suspicions that reach the president. Thus, there are no links to the president of the republic, not directly or indirectly.
بهذه الجريمة لا من قريب ولا من بعيد.
Rafiq Nasrallah, Abu Dhabi Television.
Many Syrian academics confirm that the investigation results show that Syria's enemies took advantage of Hariri's death as a way to increase pressure on Damascus because of its national and pan-Arab position.
The Syrian streets reacted with shock and surprise to Detlef Mehlis' findings regarding the assassination of late Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. The results indicated the International Investigation Committee was politically motivated, which affected its legal and criminal role.
يعرف ألف باء سياسي يدرك أن هذا التقرير معد سلفا.
Any reasonable political analyst or anyone who knows the basics of political science can see that this report was prepared in advance. By the way, the ones who prepared it, America and Israel in particular, did not hide their objectives at all. They disclosed what they wanted from this report and other reports that were made concerning the region. I only want to talk about the frank statements made by the Israeli foreign minister that the UN resolution 1559 was manufactured in Israel. He did not hide that at all. Several days ago, he said that the world should put more pressure on Syria. This means that he wants Syria to change its position concerning the Palestinian plight and Iraq, as well as the Syrian persistence to protect their national sovereignty. This report targeted the Syrian policy, the Syrian homeland, and the entire region. The US and Israel are sending the message that they can take advantage of the UN to accuse people in the region with any kind of accusations that they want, and that they better submit to their decisions. This report targets every Syrian citizen and every Arab national to make him feel that he has no role in growing the future of his homeland and nation, and that he cannot have his own independent views and national pride.
وبأي شكل نريد فعليكم أن تنصاعوا لقراراتنا. هذا التقرير يستهدف كل مواطن سوري، كل وطني سوري، وكل وطني عربي يريدون أن يقولوا له لقد انتهى دورك في صياغة مستقبل وطنك، وفي صياغة مستقبل أمتك، وفي أن تكون مستقل الرأي، وفي أن تكون ذو كرامة وطني.
باختصار شديد، أي إنسان رمى حجر على إسرائيل
In short, the report means that anyone who threw a stone at Israel in the past or recently must be punished. America wants to punish anyone who can be linked to destabilizing Israeli security. Israel is the only beneficiary from this weird report. I urge citizens to be alert to what is really happening, and I urge all the honorable Arabs to do their part, because Syria is being subjected to the biggest conspiracy in history. We have never seen any country being subjected to this kind of pressure before.
نظرنا أي دولة تعرضت لهذا الضغط منذ قرون عديدة.
يعني الحقيقة نحن توقعنا أن التقرير يكون أكثر تقنية، يعني يكون في شيء علمي أكثر. الحقيقة هو مبني.
We expected it to be more objective and scientific, but in reality, it is very similar to what we've been hearing even before the report came out. I was surprised because they did not have to spend all that money. They just could have made it as soon as Hariri was assassinated. The same accusations that were made in advance, which we had heard earlier, were made again in this report.
The report was the topic of discussions among Syrians, many of whom put it in the framework of pressures exerted on Syria in an attempt to force it to reverse its position.
أغرب ما في الأمر أن هذا التقرير تمت معرفته بصورة شبه كلية قبل إعلانه رسميا.
The strangest thing is that this report was known even before it was announced in the United Nations headquarters this morning. Mehlis and his team were leaking information to the media about what the results in the report had arrived to, or maybe Mehlis and his team were relying on the claims that were made in the media, who immediately after the assassination blamed it on Syria and the joint Lebanese-Syrian intelligence agencies. All that the report has indicated is that such an operation could never have happened without coordination between Lebanese and Syrian intelligence. But the international investigation team and the report failed to point out the ones responsible for the assassination, even after 4 months of continuous investigation.
بعد أكثر من 4 أشهر من التحقيق المتواصل من تحديد جهة مباشرة مسؤولة عن هذا.
اعتبر المتحدث باسم مجلس الحوار الوطني صالح.
Spokesman for the National Reconciliation Conference, Saleh al-Mutlaq, said that if the current constitution should pass, this would create a loss of confidence in the political process in the country, warning that holding Saddam Hussein's trial at this time might be an attempt to distract people's attention from tallying the votes.
إذا مر الدستور رغم هذه اللغة الكبيرة التي قالها العراقيون.
If the constitution should pass, despite the many reservations that Iraqis have, then the following will happen. First, the extremists will win and say they were right when we told you not to be fooled by the democratic process and that there is no democracy in Iraq. This will make it difficult for those who are trying to engage people in the political process in the coming elections. Their job will be very difficult because they won't be able to convince people to participate in the political process like they can now. People will lose confidence in the political process in general in Iraq. In addition, we warn that holding the trial of former President Saddam Hussein at the same time the votes are being tallied is an attempt to pass the constitution by distracting people with the trial.
ونحذر من أن يكون هذا الموضوع هو سحب الاتجاه إلى محاكمة الرئيس صدام حسين وتمرير الدستور.
The National Unity Conference, whose charter was announced in Baghdad on Monday, called for using dialogue and national reconciliation as the foundation for the stages beginning after the implementation of the Constitution and in preparation for electing of a permanent National Assembly and Iraqi government in the elections that will take place on December 15th this year.
The referendum on the Constitution has not been completed yet, but a major player emerged, who announced that this round is the introduction of a major battle, which will take place in the end of this year. He added that he will be a more influential player in it than he was in the previous elections.
The Iraqi national project is fundamental, and the coming stage is based on important principles. The success or failure of the national project depends on deepening national unity and strengthening it, as well as getting rid of tribalism so loyalty to Iraq as one nation would replace loyalty to any other group, regardless of whether it is religious, sectarian, or racial.
New alliances appeared, and other alliances renewed their framework. All agreed that they should learn from past mistakes. Meanwhile, other parties have dominated the Iraqi streets because they were able to gain most of the seats in the current parliament.
Concerning the role of this conference, if the people say yes to the Constitution, despite all of its shortcomings, it means that the new government has a big role to play, which is to reform this Constitution and put it on the right track. Thus, this conference calls for national reconciliation, and that is the foundation of everything.
هذا المؤتمر يدعو إلى المصالحة الوطنية وهي الأساس. هذا المؤتمر هو مؤتمر الوحدة الوطنية العراقية.
This is the National Iraqi Unity Conference. It will produce national Iraqi alliances to run in the elections scheduled to take place, God willing, on the 15th of December 2005.
2005 على ضوء هذا التكتل السياسي الجديد الذي سينبثق من مؤتمر الوحدة الوطنية العراقية.
I believe that this alliance will be challenging to other political parties, but it will be on the side of the Iraqi people.
Although some parties were absent in the National Unity Conference, whose charter was announced yesterday, still, these parties did not hold back their willingness to join this conference if they were invited, thus adding more weight to this large coalition. The National Unity Conference, which encompasses prominent political parties, has imposed itself as a force to be reckoned with in the current political balance of power in Iraq, especially because the upcoming Iraqi elections are coming soon. Raed Ahmed, Arab News Broadcast, Baghdad.
انتهت في 5 من مساء أمس الأربعاء عمليات تلقي طلبات.
At 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the process of receiving applications from candidates in the parliamentary elections, which began last Saturday, ended. The final list of names will be announced on the 27th of this month, after the Higher Election Committee eliminates the names of unqualified candidates. Security agencies from different parts of the Republic will receive objections and appeals and will announce the results a week from today. The National Democratic Party has nominated 444 candidates on its list, while the opposition alliance, the National Alliance for Change, is running the elections only with 255 candidates. The doors for nomination applications are now closed for the 2005 parliamentary elections, which everybody has been anticipating after a year of political, social, and economic activity in the country, especially in the wake of amending Constitutional Article 76. This article has given birth to a new republic, beginning with electing its president through direct elections. More than 4,000 candidates from throughout the country have submitted their applications. Everyone is anticipating the results that will be reached by the appeals committee, reviewing the rejections and appeals, which will determine the final list of candidates on the 26th of this month.
Of course, some applications will be rejected. The appeals committee will start reviewing the applications over the next 3 days. For example, some candidates' applications were rejected because they were missing a document. They now have the right to submit this document to the appeals committee, which will have the final say.
The last day to submit the candidacy applications was just like all previous days, crowded with many candidates submitting their applications inside the Republic Security Administration building, which closed its doors at 5 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Observers believe that the election campaigns of different candidates will become more heated because the elections will be affected by the new political realities in the country.
For the first time, we are witnessing divisions among large, strong families and tribes, especially in the Said area, due to the emergence of internal differences among tribes. We don't know exactly how this matter will be resolved, especially because it is happening parallel to the divisions among independent parties and groups that split from the National Democratic Party.
Ordinary Egyptians are demanding parliamentary elections to exhibit objectivity in the way they present their platforms, without presenting exaggerated promises that cannot be achieved.
Some people are honest and others are not. The National Democratic Party supports its candidates, but the ones outside the party have nobody to support them.
Because promises are the foundation of election campaigns, it is important that judicial committees completely supervise the process by giving an opportunity to all the candidates without taking sides. This year, new candidates with general platforms probably and most importantly will make new deals and shining promises. Candidates' ambitions are focused on attaining parliament seats, which they attempt to gain by making compromises.
Six Israelis were injured overnight when Palestinians threw stones at cars on the bypass road near the West Bank settlement of Beitar Illit. One woman was moderately hurt and 4 others lightly wounded. The rock throwing began after the funeral of Adnan Taser, a 15-year-old Palestinian youth killed earlier by IDF soldiers near Bethlehem. Taser had been hurling Molotov cocktails at passing Israeli cars on the Hussan bypass road, a route serving hundreds of vehicles daily. An additional 3 petrol bombs were found alongside the body. Meanwhile, IDF forces apprehended 6 wanted fugitives in the West Bank overnight. 4 were captured in Nablus and identified as belonging to Islamic Jihad, while the other 2 were taken into custody in Al-Bira and Berzeit. In the Old City of Jerusalem today, some 175,000 Muslims took part in prayers, marking the 3rd Friday of the holy month of Ramadan on the Islamic calendar. The prayer service was conducted without disturbances, and the worshippers dispersed quietly and without incident. There's been a mixed reaction in the Prime Minister's office today to yesterday's White House meeting between U.S. President George W. Bush and Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas. Officials were disappointed that during the joint press conference, and reportedly in the course of their talks as well, Bush did not actively oppose participation of the Hamas terror group in the upcoming PA parliamentary elections. Despite this, officials in Jerusalem said that they were gratified for the continuation of American pressure on the Palestinians to fight terror as the first step toward peace. They were also pleased that the U.S. president refused to lay down a timetable for Palestinian statehood or even promised that it would occur by the end of the Bush presidency. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's office dismissed the president's demands and criticisms of Israel, saying that Bush simply repeated previous comments. The Palestinian leadership, on the other hand, was disappointed by the Bush refusal to set a target date for statehood, but was pleased by the presidential hint that Washington would not object to Hamas participation in the elections. Here are a few brief excerpts from the remarks made yesterday on the White House lawn.
We expect all parties to adhere to the roadmap. And we are holding people to account on the pledges that both the Palestinians and the Israeli have made on the roadmap. And we do so publicly and we do so privately. It's a lot of these issues that have been very difficult for a long period of time become easier to resolve as there's more trust between the parties. And trust becomes a permanent part of the political process as action on the ground takes place. The Gaza withdrawal is a magnificent opportunity to help develop trust. It's an opportunity to develop trust between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and after all, the world watch. Strong cooperation between two willing governments to help the disengagement of Gaza, which is right now, I guess we take it all for granted. You look back, as I think prior to the disengagement, there was a lot of consternation, a lot of concern. I suspect some of you might have even reported that, better watch out. This disengagement can end up being a very difficult period. And yet, thanks to the President's leadership and Prime Minister Sharon's leadership, the disengagement worked, which established trust. The President has got an assignment and a job, and that's to establish trust with the Palestinian people. He is a man who said, I'm running on peace platform, and therefore he has talked to us about using security forces to make sure that armed gangs don't disrupt the democratic process. And our job is to help him do that. And so, to answer your question, yes, we hold people to account for their promises made on the roadmap. And many of those promises will be easier to keep for all parties as there's progress on the ground. And we have seen remarkable progress during the past year. And the progress isn't over this year. There will be elections. This is a very hopeful period. I'm very upbeat about being able to achieve this vision. I understand it's hard. Things don't happen overnight. Old feuds aren't settled immediately. And it takes a while. The key thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that there are partners in peace. Prime Minister Sharon wants there to be peace. President Abbas wants there to be peace. And both men are showing strong leadership to achieving that objective. And that's why I'm confident. I'm a heck of a lot more confident today than when I was when I first came into office. Now, I know it's nearly 5 years ago, and that's an eternity for some. But there's been remarkable progress in this part of the world. And we'll continue to work with the parties to achieve this important objective: 2 democratic states living side by side in peace.
The President of the African Union Commission will visit France this week to discuss EU-French cooperation on peace and security issues, immigration and development aid on the continent. An official said on Monday that former Malian President Alpha Omar Konar will be making his first official visit to France when he departs from EU headquarters on Friday. The talks are expected to focus on the troubled peace process in Ivory Coast and a furor over African immigration to Europe. CONARI spokesman Adam Thiam said that AU cooperation with France, in particular on questions of peace and security in Africa, as well as French initiatives on increasing development aid, will be on the program. He noted that Ivory Coast and immigration are also on the agenda. The visit of CONARI to France, which will last until October 27, comes amid continued instability and political wrangling in the former French colony of Ivory Coast, where elections due to have been held at month's end have been postponed. The AU, in a plan endorsed by the UN Security Council, has called for embattled Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo to remain as head of state for a maximum of another 12 months over the objections of his political foes and rebels who hold the north of the country. CONARI's trip also comes as controversy over African immigration to Europe that has hit a high point with the deaths of would-be migrants in recent months trying to break into Spanish enclaves in North Africa. Liberia's presidential elections appeared headed for a second round as the latest tally on Sunday from last week's vote showed soccer great George Weah's lead was still too narrow to win outright. With the results in from 84% of polling stations across the war-ravaged West African country, former FIFA World Player of the Year Weah led the field of 22 candidates with 30% of the vote. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a former finance minister and World Bank economist, was in second place with 19.6% of the vote. She would become Africa's first elected female president if she won. Any candidate must gain 50% plus one vote to win outright in the first round. Otherwise, a runoff will be held in early November between the two leaders. National Elections Commission Chief Francis Johnson Morris, announcing the figures at a news conference, declined to comment on whether a second round was now inevitable. An official announcement is due by Tuesday. With Liberia's infrastructure in tatters following a brutal 14-year civil war, which killed almost 250,000 people, many voters will face long journeys if they have to cast their ballots again. Tuesday's presidential and parliamentary polls were the first in Liberia since the war ended in 2003 after former president and warlord Charles Taylor went into exile in Nigeria. International election observers, diplomats, and United Nations officials have praised the peaceful conduct of an election broadly judged so far to have been free and fair. Africa's oldest independent republic, Liberia, was founded by freed American slaves in 1847. It enjoyed relatively stability for well over a century, becoming a center for rubber and iron ore production. Swedish police have arrested a Somalian man who was visiting Sweden for an aid conference. Police said on Monday that the arrest came after exiled Somalians denounced him to police as a war criminal and provided a videotape as evidence. The man, identified only as a 57-year-old Somalian, was arrested in the southern university town of Lund late on Sunday and taken to the city of Gothenburg. Prosecutors were awaiting the arrival of an interpreter to question him on Monday. Some human rights groups estimate that 500,000 Somalis have lost their lives in the violence since warlords ousted Mohammed Said Barre in 1991, plunging the Horn of Africa nation of about 10 million people into anarchy. The United States and the United Nations intervened in 1992-1993 to try to secure peace, but withdrew by early 1995 after losing control. Some warlords now hold government posts under an interim government formed in neighboring Kenya in 2004.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.